Picture an ant colony with hundreds of thousands of workers expanding outward beneath the same patch of ground. Tunnels stretch in multiple directions, just inches below the surface. Scouts move through narrow passages, mapping space through chemical signals. Pheromone trails spread back toward the nest, guiding more workers into new areas. What happens over the next few hours isn't random movement. It's controlled expansion, with pathways reinforced in chemical layers and growth driven by sheer numbers. We're going to walk through exactly how that system builds itself, what the structure looks like underground, and why some colonies can grow for years without ever being noticed. The common image of ants is a few insects wandering across the surface, picking up food and moving on. That's not really what's happening, and what actually exists is far more organized than people expect. Beneath that movement is a network of tunnels, chambers, and storage spaces, all connected and constantly maintained. The surface activity is just a small extension of something much larger, a system that operates mostly out of sight and rarely reveals its full scale. When a scout moves through a new section of ground, it doesn't just explore and leave. It lays down a chemical trail as it moves, marking the path back to the colony. That signal builds quickly, because each ant that follows strengthens it with its own layer. One scout becomes 10 workers, 10 becomes 100, 100 becomes 1,000, all moving through the same narrow routes, all following the same chemical instructions that guide them back and forth between the surface and the expanding network below. What that signaling system can't do is map out the full size of the network it's building into. The pheromone trail scales up the same way whether the tunnel system ahead is small or already connected to a much larger section underground. Workers follow and reinforce the path the same way, extending routes deeper and wider. And from the surface, it looks like simple movement. But the structure isn't defined by what you see above. It's defined by how much the colony can build and sustain below. Now, consider what actually drives that growth. When a colony reaches a certain scale, its expansion speed starts to multiply because more workers are available to dig, reinforce, and extend tunnels at the same time. The structure doesn't grow evenly. It accelerates. The colony doesn't build more efficiently at the individual level. It simply has more workers operating at once, allowing the network to spread faster than smaller colonies can match. Think of multiple construction crews working on the same underground project at once, and one system has 3 times the workers. Each individual is doing the same task, but the larger group expands the structure faster simply because more work is happening at the same time. The smaller system progresses, but it can't keep up with the pace. The larger colony operates the same way. Growth becomes uneven because one side is constantly extending further, while the other struggles to match that scale. Observations from large ant colonies show this pattern clearly. The expansion isn't sudden or dramatic. What you see instead is a gradual spread. Tunnels reach further, new chambers appear, and more surface area becomes connected to the same system. The colony doesn't reveal itself all at once. It simply extends in every direction, quietly increasing its reach until the scale of what's underneath is far larger than anything visible above. So the driving force behind most colony expansion isn't how aggressive individual workers are or how strong they seem at the surface. It's how much the system underneath can sustain over time. Growth isn't decided by any single action. It comes down to how many workers are available to keep building, reinforcing and maintaining the network without slowing down. Size becomes the real factor at work here. Behavior, structure, and signaling all contribute, but none of them override the scale of the system itself. What observations show is that when the difference in scale is large enough, the outcome of expansion is almost set before you ever notice activity on the surface. But when that difference narrows, When two systems are operating at a similar size, the pattern changes completely, and the growth process shifts into something slower, more complex, and far more demanding on both sides. Similar scale means neither system can outpace the other through sheer growth, so what you get instead isn't balance, it's a sustained slowdown. Expansion continues, but at a reduced rate, with both systems investing more effort just to maintain what they already have. Most of that strain stays hidden because the surface still looks active, even as the underlying progress becomes harder to sustain. What colonies of similar size actually do when their underground networks begin to overlap is establish boundaries. Chemical trails from both sides intersect, creating zones where movement becomes restricted, and workers redirect activity along defined edges instead of pushing further outward. The system holds, and both colonies continue operating, but maintaining that structure requires constant effort. Workers that would normally expand the network or gather resources are now tied to maintaining those boundaries, and over time, that cost builds, reducing how efficiently the colony can grow. From the outside, this still looks stable. Activity continues at the surface, workers move in and out, and nothing dramatic stands out. But inside the system, the pressure builds steadily, because efficiency drops when a portion of the workforce is redirected away from expansion and resource collection toward maintaining existing pathways and boundaries. The colony invests effort into holding its structure instead of extending it, and over a full season, that trade-off adds up to a system that grows more slowly than it otherwise could, not because it failed, but because it never stopped absorbing that hidden cost. Now, consider where that pressure actually shows up. In dense environments where multiple colonies operate close together, systems under constant constraint begin to shift how they allocate resources. Growth doesn't stop completely, but certain stages slow down or are reduced. The colony prioritizes maintaining what already exists over pushing into new space, and the overall expansion cycle becomes more limited. A queen can live for many years and spend that time supporting a colony that continues building long after its initial formation. When sustained pressure limits expansion, it doesn't destroy the system, but it keeps it contained. The network holds its current structure while its potential reach remains fixed, season after season, with little outward growth compared to less constrained environments. So when multiple colonies operate at similar scale in the same area, the result isn't rapid growth or collapse. It acts more like a brake on the system as a whole. Activity continues, but expansion slows across all sides, and in densely packed regions, entire underground networks can remain stable for long periods without significantly increasing their range. What you see above stays the same, while below, the system quietly balances between maintaining itself and the limits of how far it can grow. The ecological impact extends beyond the colony itself. Soil movement shifts in areas where expansion slows because fewer workers are actively digging and extending tunnels into new ground. Seed dispersal patterns change, since fewer workers are carrying seeds along newly formed routes back into the network. Animals that rely on seasonal ant activity, including birds and insects that time their feeding around periods of high movement, encounter different conditions when colony growth is limited. The structure beneath the surface shapes what grows, what feeds, and how movement happens across that entire patch of land, even though most of it remains completely out of sight. What we've walked through here isn't really about individual behavior, it's about scale, and how differences in size and capacity shape what a colony can build over time. When that scale reaches a certain point, expansion becomes consistent and predictable. When it doesn't, growth slows and the system settles into a more limited pattern that can last for long periods without obvious change. Next time you spot a foraging line crossing a sidewalk, consider what's happening just beneath it. That path is part of a larger network being maintained in real time, with workers moving between the surface and a system of tunnels and chambers below. Some are extending routes, others reinforcing them, and the colony's ability to grow next season is already being shaped by how efficiently that system operates right now. If this kind of systems-level view of the hidden world beneath your feet is what you're interested in, subscribe, because we break down how these unseen networks work across every environment we cover.